Glenn Close once said, "What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation." Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Better Y Phase 2, a project organized by the Rotaract Club of Colombo East together with the YMCA Sri Lanka. This project would not have been possible without Sumithrayo Sri Lanka, our official event partner, our digital media partners Lanka Deepa Online and Daily Mirror Online, and our live stream partner Flexus Labs. Mental health problems affect about 1 in 10 children and young people. Alarmingly, however, 70% of the children and young people who experience a mental health problem have not had appropriate interventions at a sufficiently early age. This is why discussions such as this is of utmost importance. Now, this discussion is held with the hope of raising awareness among the youth of Sri Lanka regarding mental health and helping them understand how to identify individuals suffering from these mental health issues. At the end of today's session, we hope to empower the audience by assisting them in overcoming adversity within their youth and teaching them how to lead a happy and healthy life. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the panelists for this session. First, we have He is currently functioning as consultant child and adolescent psychiatric at the Colombo South Teaching Hospital. He has also earned fame as one of the few doctors who specialized and trained in family therapy while obtaining his master's degree from the University of Colombo Postgraduate Institute of Medicine. He is a renowned researcher in the field and has submitted remarkable publications on the titles Mental Health Literacy in Adolescents, Stigma Related to Mental Health Issues, Catatonia in Children and Adolescents, etc. He serves as an honorary member of the Sri Lanka Association of Child Development and has rendered a notable service to the community as a medical specialist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Udena Artikala. Hi, Dr. Udena. Thank you so much for taking your time and being with us here this evening.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes. So on to our second panelist. She is a licensed clinical psychologist who has specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy and marriage, couple, and family therapy from the USA and is a founder of the widely acclaimed mental health blog in Sri Lanka, The Mind Manager. She currently serves as the Group Wellness Manager of Hemas Holdings and is also a corporate athlete trainer of the Human Performance Institute of Johnson & Johnson's USA. She is an honorary member of the American Association of Marriage Family Therapists and a director of membership and social media of the American Alumni Association of Sri Lanka. She has been featured in several publications for her exceptional contribution towards mental health and wellness, including the Daily Mirror, Ceylon Today, Workout.lk, the Finance Times, the Morning.lk, and Cosmopolitan Sri Lanka. She is a pioneering individual in the mental health industry. Presenting you our panelist, Dr. Chanel de Almeida.
Hello.
Hi, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so moving on to introducing our third panelist this evening. She is famed as the one-woman force by Cosmopolitan Sri Lanka. She is a brand purpose consultant and a TEDx speaker who has never hesitated to raise her voice for a cause. She is an experienced skills coach and a mentor who's widely known as the host of the talk show, which is Sri Lanka's first online community talk show for women, addressing social stigmas and gender empowerment narratives. Now, she's also a podcaster and an advocate for various causes such as animal welfare, gender rights, and mental health advocacy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shanki Dialves.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So moving on to our fourth and final panelist. An acclaimed and a well-known personality in the fitness industry, she is a certified fitness and wellness coach who conducts the exemplary training program Gaia Strong Her, which has transformed the lives of many women. owning the largest female fitness-driven platform in Sri Lanka. She also shares her invaluable knowledge and experience as a content creator, a speaker, while spreading the message of mental health, physical movement, nutrition, self-awareness, and self-love. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gaia Kodituaku. Hi, Gaia.
So sorry, I'm something off with the reception.
It's fine. It's fine. It's completely understandable. So actually, before we progress on to the next segment in today's session, on behalf of the committee and the Rotaract Club of Colombo East, I would like to congratulate Gaia on your engagement. May you both be blessed with a lifetime of happiness.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's move on to the question and answer session of today's segment. So first of all, on the outset of today's session, my first question is, what does mental health mean to you, and how important is it for an individual to have a healthy mental well-being? Any one of our panelists could take up this question.
I can go if everyone's
Yes.
okay. So it's mental well-being for me is the combination of psychological well-being and emotional well-being, right? And it's about how well you manage it, right? And if you balance it well, then your relational issues can be handled, your personal vendettas and your work life and your balance of how you look at the world are all balanced. So mental well-being is extremely important because it's a huge chunk of who we are as human beings. So if we don't manage that amazing dimension, right, we cannot live our best lives. So in terms of mental well-being, I would say it's just as important as physical well-being because it constitutes all the part of emotional, psychological, and overall well-being.
Thank you, Shana. Could Shanuki add a little bit on
Okay.
that? Yeah.
So for me, mental well-being is, I mean, a lot of people assume that mental health means you're positive all the time, right? That everything's like sunshine and rainbows, which is not the case. To me personally, the definition of mental health and mental well-being is your mental resilience, because life comes with the ups and downs. No life is perfect, and no day comes without, its fair share of darkness. And mental health is a person's ability to cope, to deal, and to get through the trying times in a way that you kind of you keep going, you keep moving on without it having too much of an adverse effect on your life or on your moods or on your emotions. So that sense of resilience, the coping mechanism, the power of coping that you have in your mind is what I would see as positive mental health.
Okay. Dr. Udena?
Yeah, I think I agree with the others. It's also that, I think Western philosophy and Western thinking is finally kind of coming to a stage where they kind of agree with Eastern philosophies, what we always knew, that, your mental well-being is connected with all the other things, your physical well-being. So this dichotomy is kind of a false dichotomy. And when somebody asks us, are you well? Are you well? They really mean your whole being. So again, it's all linked with everything else. And as I think Shanuki mentioned as well, it's not merely surviving, but also thriving, and resilience is a major factor in that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Udena. Gaia, could you add a little bit onto this?
I can't agree more with what Doctor said, because being in an industry and in a profession where your physical well-being is prioritized, what I've learned through my my personal experience and what I see with my clients is that it's almost as if it's the same thing. Your mental well-being reflects in the way your body functions and vice versa. So, and also like Doctor said, it's about thriving. It's not about just surviving and just getting through the day, but really
growing and reaching your true potential.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gaia. So the next question I would like to aim at Dr. Chanel. This is rather regarding the youth of today. What are some of the common mental health conditions that can be seen in the youth today? And what do you think is the reason for these conditions to arise?
Well, in my experience, I've noticed of late that self-esteem is at the root cause of a lot of the mental dysfunctions that come into the office. And I think as doctors, we kind of look at people and try and prescribe and try and diagnose. But the fact is, when it comes to the mental aspect, it's so complex, and it has a lot to do with how the person sees themselves. And in relation to the systems around us, like our marriages or our friends or our jobs, and the role that we have to play in society, this causes a lot of questioning of the self-concept and how we seem to identify as individuals. So I would say a lot of it has to do with a combination of self-esteem, self-concept, relational issues. A lot of people are struggling with their relationships for various reasons. Part of it comes from the way they see themselves, because they believe there's this pressure. And of course, social media, I mean, we all use social media, and it has really benefited us quite well. But at the same time, there are huge repercussions of this fishbowl world that we live in, because everyone sees what we're up to. Everyone thinks that they need to show that they're doing something, even when they're not, or they have to amplify everything. So it's a hyper kind of exaggerated world that we're living in. And whatever makes the most noise tends to get the most attention. So
I believe Dr. Shanala's connection failed. Am I right? Yeah. So while we wait for her to rejoin the session, for her to continue on this, could Dr. Udena take up the question and give your thoughts on this issue also?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
did I lose myself?
Yes. So after Dr. Shanala, maybe Dr. Udena also could add what he thinks of this issue. Yeah, Dr. Shanala, you can go ahead.
Sorry?
You can go ahead. You got cut off, I think, bad connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So basically, as I was saying, it's mainly the root cause is self-esteem and the threat to self-concept and the environment that we live in, which is amplified by social media. So I think once people realize that through introspection and psychotherapy and all these other various modalities that we have to our disposal, if we can reconstruct that self-concept in a healthy way, as Shanuk said, not toxic positivity, but the resilient positivity is what we're talking about, right? Then I would say that's when you really see the light bulb go off with clients and patients, where they understand that the power really is within you, right? To change your life and how you live it.
Since this is actually one of the fields of expertise of Dr. Udena, maybe he also can add his retrospect on this topic.
I mean, in my experience, if you want to give it a label, depression, anxiety would be the major causes why youth would come to us. But it's also a very kind of a mixed picture, if I can say that. They come to us with problems rather than labels. And an interesting fact is, they've really found out that around half of all the adult mental health issues crop up before 18 years of age, and around three-fourths of these problems crop up before, say, the age of 24. But because youth or adolescents are at a stage, biologically where their brains are still developing, these disorders present in these issues present in a kind of a very mixed way. So it won't present as, depression or anxiety, but in a very mixed way, and these kind of conditions are also developing. So that makes it a bit difficult to kind of identify these issues in one way. And another perspective on this is we all are in a way part of what we call a gene environmental interaction. So what we bring to the table, what we are, and what's on the table. And there's a huge interaction between these two uh, through childhood towards youth. And when we come to becoming in our 20s, we are a product of all these interactions. They could be relational interactions as well. And when you are in this vulnerable kind of stage in your development, all these things can really affect how adversity affects you, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Udena. And since Dr. Chanel brought the concept of social media on board, my next question is actually directed to Gaia. Why do body image and self-esteem matter? And how can we change the toxic mindset of the youth in order to encourage a healthier body image?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so basically, since Dr. Chanel touched upon the concept of social media, I thought that we should talk about a little bit about toxic body image. So the question for you is basically, why do body image and self-esteem matter, and how can we change the toxic mindset rather of the youth in order to encourage a healthier body image?
I up until very recently didn't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. It's a bit
Okay.
laggy, but we can hear you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So I up until very recently didn't know um, that I had body image issues till probably last year. um, I mean, being in this industry where you're constantly looked at in a critical eye to look a certain way. After 2 years of competing back to back, my body went through a massive transformation, and I ended up putting on a lot of weight because I went through a lot of hormonal issues. So I put on close to 20 kilos after competing 2 years in a row. And I realized I had to go through that process in order for my body to heal. I'm just checking if you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Can you
can
guys
hear
hear
you.
me?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. So I knew I had to put my body through that process of healing in order to become healthy again. And in that process, I learned that I needed to love myself and my body, um, not when it looks good and not when I'm functioning at an optimal level, but also when I'm going through these different stages. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in such a healthy space, regardless of how I look right now. But I could actually compare myself to who I was 2 years ago when I had a six pack, when I was super lean, when I looked perfect all the time. I actually had extremely unhealthy. I had extremely unhealthy uh, like self-esteem issues. I always thought that I didn't look good. So this was, all of these things were confirmed through social media, my sport, what you see online. Even when I was on stage with probably like less than 5% body fat, I felt really fat. And now I may be 20 kilos heavier, but I'm in a really good mind space because I started looking at this whole issue from a different perspective. It's very easy to feel good when you look a certain way, but the second that is taken away from you, if you fall out of your piece, that means you were not really there in the first place, and then I actually have this conversation quite often, even today, with my friends, and I realized, wow, like I'm much bigger. I wore a swimsuit today and I was okay. Whereas back in the day when I looked perfect, it was such a toxic energy I was holding on to. And I see this constantly through social media, because everything is edited, photoshopped, smoothened. There's Facetune, Bodytune, the waistline is changed. So that's why that's why on a constant basis I speak about the flaws. I think, especially if you are someone who has a platform, or if you're a public speaker public figure, it's your responsibility to talk about your flaws. So even when I go through like a mental breakdown, I make sure, you don't have to do it, but I like to share that with people who follow me, because I think it's important to share reality. It's very easy to show like a highlight reel of all the good things that you experience in your life, but that is not reality. And especially for, in my platform, I have a lot of females who follow me. So probably 2 months ago, I went through this massive mental breakdown, and I went through a panic attack, and I was trying to record myself I was trying to talk to the camera so I feel better, because that's how I process, by speaking, by talking to the camera, and that's just a way of healing for me. And I couldn't speak. And I had like a few seconds of that on camera, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to share this just so people know that every single person goes through this. And this is why I think it's super important for people to understand that what you see on social media is not real. Even the most good looking people, athletes, models, actors, they don't look like look like the person on Instagram in real life. So this is where a lot of that toxicity comes from, especially when it comes to the youth. I feel like they have such massive self-esteem issues, body image issues, because of what we are constantly being fed. What skin color is more appealing. So this is why I think it's important that we all share our reality.
Sure.
I don't know if I answered the question.
No, that was a very powerful and very valid statement, and that actually sets base for our next question. This is for Shanuki, and the question is: social media presently plays an important role on mental health of the youth. What is your personal opinion regarding this, and how should we be more critical viewers of messages given out by social media?
I'm going to call this the hypocritical statement, because anyone who knows me knows that I think social media is kind of my third hip. I'm married to my social media, and it's the most toxic thing ever. Social media, look, it's not possible for us to talk about not having social media anymore, right? Especially in this pandemic situation and all that. This is how people are staying connected. This is how people have some sort of connection with the outside world at the moment. It has become part and parcel of life. That said, when it comes to its users, because it just kind of blew up out of nowhere, people never really learned how to progressively engage with it and use it in a responsible way. It's become this absolute toxic demon. It's an addiction. Social media has become an addiction, especially for the youth, because for an older market, we've had lives outside of social media before the advent of social media, right? So there's, for older people, there is always a sense of, the family and your hobbies and your passions and the outdoors and all those things that have been a part of your upbringing, that you still have sort of a connection to. But with the youth, all they've had is social media for most of their lives. So it's become this, again, it's part of your system, right? And then what's also happened in this day and age is we're living in the times of instant gratification, right? And it's things like, like Gaia said, we've started looking for validation on these social media platforms, right? Back in the day, it was through achievements. Okay, so a little bit of psychology. I know the two doctors will obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but when we achieve something, when we work hard towards something and we achieve something, our brain emits this hormone, this feel-good hormone called dopamine. that makes you feel that sense of achievement. What's happening with social media is because of these instant gratifications, because of these validations and all that stuff that you're getting from it, your dopamine release is happening where you don't feel the need to pursue anything outside social media for your dopamine hit, right? So your hobbies and the outdoors and the this and the that, people don't need that because they're getting their dopamine from social media. So they're not really actively physically engaging in anything that is more sort of holistic. And then you start sort of feeling so disconnected from the real world, where this fantasy world in your screen has become now your world, right? And that's led to so much toxicity. For instance, the world of online dating, right? You have people who are opening themselves up and trusting absolute strangers that they've never met, and which is given rise to things like catfishing and the ghostings and the this and the that, and that's creating a lot of mental health trauma and stress on people who are experiencing the negative effects of online dating. But they're still opening themselves up and wearing their hearts on their sleeves and putting themselves out there. And the minute they feel rejection, they can't cope. So similarly, you're doing things for the likes. Guy already pointed that out. You are changing who you are. You are becoming a fake persona. You're photoshopping and editing yourself for those thumbs ups and heart emojis. You don't even know who they're coming from. Then by wanting that validation, you're also incredibly exposing yourself to rejection, and you can't handle the rejection at youth stage. Your mind is still developing, your sense of maturity is still developing, you're looking for that gratification. There's a lot of cyberbullying out there, there's a lot of rejection happening, and the minute you hear something negative or somebody sends you some sort of insult, a lot of the youth can't handle it. So then they spiral into depression, or you have things like some people say it's silly to feel suicidal about something so small, but we perceive as something so small and trivial. But to them, it's not small and trivial because that is their world, and their world is rejecting them. You've also got things like cybercrime, which is exploiting a lot of the youth. Harassment is happening on social media. You've created this tribalism, this sense of tribalism, where you have a groupthink thing going on. So you've disassociated with everything that's healthy and normal and holistic. And this thing on the screen becomes your life, and you are unable to deal with life outside it, therefore. So that's kind of those are the dangers of social media. And of course, the amount of time we're spending in front of the screen is affecting everybody physically as well. I could go on, but I won't.
I feel like you should save it a little bit, because the next question, you just brought it up. So
okay.
My next question is about suicide. So the suicide rate is highest during mid-teens. And this question is actually for you, Shanuki, and Dr. Artigala. Why do you think the reason behind this is, and what is different about this time in a person's life?
So I'll let Dr. Artigala have the floor.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about it being highest in mid-teens, but I mean, if you were to talk in general about why youth or adolescents would, resort to that kind of a thing, suicide itself is a very complicated act. There's a lot of other definitions. You have things like deliberate self-harm, non-suicidal self-injury. So what it all means is it's very complicated, and there's a spectrum of behavior and also a spectrum of intentionality. So intention is not the same in all issues. Why it might be affecting youth in a different way? If you were to look at it in a biological way, if you look at the brain, it's the organ that matures the last, and for good reason. There's a lot of good reasons for that. 29, biological things are really still happening in your brain. And not to say that, when you're in your 40s and 30s, your brain is still not, developing. But what happens in adolescence and youth is, um, for your capacity to feel emotions is quite well developed, but your ability to regulate yourself, that ability might not be developed to its full capacity. So you tend to be a bit impulsive. So, I mean, this is a difficult combination when you consider that you don't have the benefit of experience behind you. Knowing that this moment might change the next moment, that other people might have things worse than you do, that things might get better, things that kind of experience teaches us. Um, so that kind of puts them in a difficult situation. And again, all these social factors, these influencers, social media, immediate family, they tend to kind of have an impact when you're in this kind of a difficult situation. And the other thing I would probably think is, the stage of having an adolescent or a young person in your family is a difficult stage in a family's life cycle. If a family did have a life cycle, as a young person, you're trying to find your own way. Kind of individuation of self, or find your, rather than being influenced by your family's emotions, the way your family thinks, you're trying to find your own way. And when you're in that kind of a stage, you're liable to be influenced by a lot of things. So the old things, the morals, the values, they had the disadvantages, but they had their advantages as well. So it gave you a template on how to interact or be interacted by others. But currently, if you have a situation where everything goes, it puts youth who are trying to find themselves in a difficult situation.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Udena. Shanuki, can you
Yeah.
add on to that?
Again, like Dr. Udena said, I don't know whether the statistics are showing that the suicide rate is the highest amongst teens.
Okay.
I think there's a older segment also that is very susceptible. But definitely suicide is a problem that the youth is facing. Realistically, what's happening is, like I mentioned, we're online more than we are offline. We are not building relationships outside the screen. So you are isolated from community. You are isolated from real friends. You are isolated from building family bonds. And then what happens is, if you face some sort of stress or depression or something as a result of your social media activity, or even for some other reason, you are not in a place where you have the necessary ecosystem or the infrastructure around you that can support your resilience. So because you have isolated yourself, by default, you are disassociated with the world, that detachment is there. So you feel very, very alone. And a lot of the youth, because of this world of validation, trying to put our best foot forward and be perfect in everybody's eyes, they don't want to talk about the issues that they have. They don't want to say that they might have some flaws going on, that they might have some struggles, because they're scared of criticism. They're scared of, being seen as failures. They're scared of not being the superheroes that they project themselves to be. And then that imposter syndrome or whatever also gets to them. So, that overwhelming sense of loneliness, you are truly alone, nobody understands. That, as doctor pointed out, that immaturity to sort of know or have the experience to know what to do or how to cope with all that, contributes towards that I need a quick way out. This, I think Chanel would also sort of agree with me that it's a problem that you see in the corporate sector as well. When you take the millennial employee, there's a big difference between older employees and younger employees, because younger employees want this get rich quick attitude, instant gratification, and they're not as good as struggling. They're not as good as taking on challenges or working together or seeing themselves through. Because if something goes wrong, they go into the depths of despair. They can't handle it. And I think it's the very same thing that social media is doing to a lot of the youth as well. That resilience is much less than it is in an older audience, and therefore the ability to cope when you go through dark times is a factor in you wanting out quickly. You're not willing to fight it out. You just want that escape.
While we are on this topic, we can actually move on to our next question. This is directed at Dr. Chanel and Dr. Artigala. What are the warning signs of suicide, and why do men commit suicide more often than women? Doctor. Yeah, Chanel.
So warning signs. Well, as mentioned earlier, Dr. Artigala also said this. He said it's a bit of a complex subject. So it's not like you can just look at a person and say, oh, they're going to commit suicide. It's sometimes people have really bad days. I mean, I think we all kind of look suicidal sometimes, right? Because we go through crap and life is dramatic, right? And I think, and I really noticed this because in the US, everything is hyper dramatized, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go into the doctor's office, oh, you're clinically depressed. Yeah, here's Prozac, 50 milligrams, right? For the next 12 months. It's like they overdiagnose it over there. So people who are not even really clinically depressed are stigmatized and been diagnosed with clinical depression. Please get on the pill, right? So that's very problematic. And I think as mental health professionals, it's a real, we need to shift that conversation so that people realize that you can't just, look at the DSM criteria, which is what I was trained in the States, right? The Diagnostic Statistical Manual, where it has these like really generic symptoms, a sense of hopelessness and inability to think clearly, insomnia. And you have to display these symptoms for over 6 months. So I think we need to question the validity of this criteria and be careful not to put this on everyone, because everyone is very, human beings are so complex that it's really bad that we put everyone in a box. And ironically, I'm in a profession that does exactly that. We put people in boxes. But I think we can challenge that. I think as the new generation of speakers and public figures and talk show hosts and, people that influence the world and doctors, I think we have the power to change that, because we can shake the system and say, you know what? Just because you have a really bad day and you display certain symptoms that have been described by the DSM criteria and various other modalities, does not mean that you're necessarily this sick, suicidal person. In fact, I'll go back to what Shanuki was saying, it's about resilience. So how are you as a person and what has happened to you, right, that we can work with together, right? See, the conversation is so much more open that way, rather than saying, doctor, patient, you're sick, I know what I'm doing, here's a pill, right? So I think if we could just shift it a little bit and, look at people around you, if you learn to listen to others and observe and have emotional intelligence, which I personally think is the cure for everything, right? I'm sure Gaia and Shanuki will agree with me, even doctor, I'm sure you'd say that emotional intelligence is the really important subject matter that we should be talking about, especially within the next 10 years, that's going to be like the most important topic, right? And that basically talks about self-awareness, it talks about empathy, it talks about motivation, it talks about social skills. So I think that the cure will look more like emotional intelligence, right? And awareness, rather than prescriptive drugs or Prozac. I mean, that will never lose its validity. I think you will definitely need it. You'll still need medication, no doubt. But I don't think that needs to be central, right? So I think if we can learn to look at people as suffering, isolation is such an issue. In the West, do you know that they've defined loneliness as an epidemic? Like they've actually called, like loneliness is actually considered an epidemic in Europe, right? Which means it goes into this whole self-esteem, why we need social media, right? Because then we feel less, we don't really feel less lonely, but we think we are less lonely, right? Because we are interacting, we're connecting with people, and someone is saying that they like my, I don't know, twerking or whatever it is that, everyone wants to do at that time. So I think suicidality is something we need to question. I think we need to reframe how we diagnose and identify someone as suicidal. And I think everyone as a collective, if we start talking about it like we are today, right? I think we can change that. And it starts with a conversation. So I would say people who are going to, because everyone's going through something. Everyone's, trust me, right? Everybody's going through something. Everyone's fighting a battle of their own, right? And if we can just learn to be more emotionally intelligent, I think that would be a better approach than saying, okay, that's suicidality, that is depression. Rather, if the person themselves feels that way, and if someone they love are concerned, then you start having that conversation of clinical depression, suicidality. Maybe you need some help, and here's a referral. I'm sorry, that was like a very broad answer, but I thought
Also adding on to that question, the second part was, why do men commit suicide more often than women? Do you think it has something to do with the toxic masculinity concept?
I definitely think that's a very good question. I think it definitely is a part of it. I don't think it's the whole story, but I do think it's a part of it, because men on average are told to suck it up more than we are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can cry, we can shed a tear. It's kind of okay for us to show vulnerability. But men, it's like, oh, stop being a girl. What are you doing, Macha? Like, I've seen the way guys talk, okay? I mean, I see the way my husband's friends talk to each other, right? I'm just like, oh my God, like really? Like if it was in a girl forum, we'd be like, throwing stuff at each other because they're so insensitive, right? And I think part of it is great because it's very raw and it's interactive, but a lot of it is inward. Like they have an issue, but they don't want to show it because they're thinking, oh, I'm a man.
I should be strong. Yeah.
Yes, I've got to be strong, right? I can't show weakness. So, and I can't talk to anybody because that would look really, really vulnerable. So, that's not me. I'm a dude, right? So I think the culture has a lot to do with it. And I think it's changing slowly. I mean,
hopefully.
I'm hoping that it is.
Yeah.
But it's difficult because patriarchy, masculinity, toxic masculinity, nothing wrong with masculinity. Toxic masculinity, is that cultural aspect of, looking at men a certain way and women a certain way. I think men suffer just as much from patriarchy as women do because it's a symptom, right? Like, don't talk about your problems. You're a man, figure it out. And then the pressures and also alcohol. I mean, if you look at a lot of people who tend to commit suicide, a lot of them turn to substances, right? So alcohol and drugs. Now, alcohol is quite comorbid. Alcoholism and suicidality is comorbid, meaning it's related. So it kind of causes each other, right, to happen. So men are more likely to drink with their problems, right? So alcohol puts down your, inhibitions, and you feel like, reacting or whatever, and you're impulsive then, and it makes you more vulnerable. So I think all these factors, cultural, social, and perhaps a genetic factor also, who knows, there always is some level of nature while nurture is also there, right? So it's both nature and nurture. So I think a combination of these factors is why men tend to, and also they also say that women attempt suicide more, right? I think Dr. Article would agree with me on this. It's women attempt suicide more, but men succeed. Yes. So that basically means women tend to take things that might not be as lethal, right? Whereas men, like if you take the United States, for example, men have access to firearms, so they're more likely to shoot themselves. So, and the women are less likely to shoot themselves. They will take like a poison or overdose, try and overdose on something, which is a less likelihood of death. So, combination of factors.
Interesting. Dr. Udena, could we get your perspective on this issue?
I think we lost Gaia. Did we lose Gaia? Oh no, there she is. Okay. Hi.
So the question was, what are the warning signs of suicide? Am I right?
Yes. Yes. What are the warning signs, and why does statistics show that men attempt suicide more than women?
I mean, the first thing I think for peers, why is it important? It would be important so that they can actually help the person involved. So number one is I think if somebody expresses some kind of a thought or expression in this regard, I think we should not disregard it.
Mhm.
We should pay attention to it, and in a sense, if we can do something to help that person, I think that would be something we could do. When I said it is a complex thing, it is really a complex thing, and as Chanel also explained, you got suicide or this kind of self harm is an endpoint rather than a disorder. It's an endpoint to various things. There's various pathways that you end here, and one kind of if you try to understand it through a model, so it makes it easy for us to understand. I mean, you can look at it in stages. You got a pre-motivational stage, a stage where you're not really motivated to kind of engage in anything like this. And then you got a stage where you're actually motivated. You really want to do it. And then there's a volitional stage where the act is carried out. And I won't really talk about the volitional stage because I think it's a sensitive topic. And when we talk about suicide, there's a way we should, certain topics should be handled. But if I were to talk about the motivational stage, I mean, the things that come up is, a sense of hopelessness, feeling humiliated. There is no escape from a situation. If you feel that somebody is in that state of mind, that's when you should be concerned. And also, there are factors that modulate you shifting to the volitional stage when you're in the motivational stage. Let's put it that way. I mean, if you got good social support, a previous history of good social problem solving, good coping skills, you don't tend to kind of ruminate on losses and such things a lot. So if you got a history of that kind of a thing, and you find such a person, then you kind of feel that okay, even though although he kind of or she feels this way, I feel a bit assured that he is able to cope. On the other hand, you have all these other things, whether the person has family support, an understanding person to talk to, that kind of support. So, being aware of those things and trying to help out in those things is important. If you come to an even earlier stage, when the person is actually not motivated, but might kind of, go into this kind of state, what kind of a person would it be? You can look at the person's personality of what you know about that person. If it's a friend, past experience, what does that tell you about him or her? And this person comes across a life event. Usually it's things like a grief event, a grief and loss event. And it hasn't got to be a person dying, losing a job, losing your what you thought your self-image was. Those are also kind of grief events that kind of warns you that this person might be vulnerable. I need to help that person. So if you were to look at the warning signs, I hope that kind of helps in explaining.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Udena. So I feel like Gaia has been very quiet. So my next question is out to Gaia. Participation in regular physical activity is known to increase our self-esteem and reduce stress and anxiety. Now, this also plays a role in preventing the development of mental health problems. How can we encourage the youth of Sri Lanka to improve their mental health through fitness?
Midway through, you fell off. I heard the first
Oh,
bit.
okay.
Midway through, you.
Okay, so basically the question is, when you participation in like regular physical activity is known to increase our self-esteem and reduce stress and anxiety. Now this also plays a role in preventing or like development of mental health problems. uh, Gaia, do you agree with this statement? And if you do, how can we encourage the youth of Sri Lanka to improve their mental health through fitness?
I
It's
mean,
a bit of
absolutely.
a, yeah, big
Yeah.
question.
So I'll answer the first part first.
Okay.
Um, so it absolutely helps. It's something that I've experienced within myself, and then also I've trained up at least 8 people from all over the world in the past couple of years, and I've also seen not just how women change their physical appearance or how they perform, or how their physical well-being changes, but how um, their perception, um, their emotional intelligence, their confidence, their self-esteem, their level of focus, the way they perform at work, everything changes. So it plays a massive role in your mental health. Um, and of course then you get the science, the scientific explanation as to why it happens. Your happy hormones, your dopamine release helps you feel better. So back in the day when I would go through periods of feeling really low, or feeling borderline suicidal, I would definitely, as someone who was in that space, I would realize, like, I would just literally go outside and get some movement in, walking, running, yoga, training, whatever it is, and I would immediately feel the difference. So it's something that every single person should do. Like, we have this conversation on a daily basis. I recently had a conversation with a friend's father who's actually going through a lot of stress because he lost a lot of money in business. He basically lost everything that he owned, and he was telling me about how he couldn't function, how he was experiencing insomnia. And I was talking to him about how movement can actually take him to a space where he can actually start thinking clearly and function differently.
Mm-hmm.
So movement is everything. Elliot House, one of my most favorite strength coaches, talks about how we hold on to our trauma through neurotic holding patterns. So it's trapped in our bodies. So when we move, um, it's a method of release. We process all these emotions that's stuck in our body through movement. So for me personally, I realized when I do yoga, I do walking, I do running, but for me when I lifted weights, it felt more aggressive, in comparison to, for an example, for what I've gone through, being a victim of sexual abuse, and gone through, um, being assaulted by a certain person. So this aggressive way of release really helped me ground myself and really find myself and find my confidence again. So it's absolutely crucial that every single person goes through it, especially with certain clients who go through these mental health issues. And whenever they go through like a dark patch, I always encourage them to go out. It doesn't matter what you do, just start moving, because that itself will alleviate that state you're in, just to help you think better, think from a clearer perspective. Now moving on to the second question, I forgot what it is.
So basically, the question is, how can we encourage the youth of Sri Lanka to improve their mental health through fitness?
So
Yeah.
one thing I always say is not to complicate it. You don't have to be a CrossFitter or someone who's really advanced in what they do. You don't have to be super flexible and do complicated yoga poses. You start where you start from where you can. So for an example, for me, when I was extremely overweight, I was over 90 kilos heavy. I started with walking. Then I tried a bit of yoga, and then in fitness we call it progressive overload method. That's when you aim to progress every single week. Whatever you did this week, next week we try to do it a little bit better. So that method with walking, running, yoga, lifting weights, whatever it is, swimming, it would help you. So consistency and doing what you can from what's available to you. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I think the reason is because a lot of us are intimidated to try something new. For me, when I joined the gym, I couldn't fall asleep for 2 days straight because I was super intimidated by how the entire gym was, it was all men and it was just me. So it used to give me so much anxiety. But it's just a matter of doing it, right? And it doesn't have to be too complicated. You don't have to even start with training or whatever it is, you can start by going for a walk in the morning. So do what you can, and consistency is key.
Okay. Thank you, Gaia. So moving on to our next question. This is for Shanuki. In terms of academic performance and social life, how do issues like anxiety and depression interfere with the lives of teenagers and young adults?
How does it not affect their lives? Um, yeah, so these are mental blocks that happen when you go through anxiety. Again, experience, right? I suffer from clinical anxiety and clinical depression. I've just learned to manage them. But anxiety makes you constantly feel like a failure, makes you fear failure if it hasn't happened yet. You're so sure, you're so convinced that something is terribly wrong. um, you become debilitated, mind and body. And there are different ways in which people experience anxiety. And obviously, when it comes to your social behaviors and your academia, this becomes a factor that you're not able to trust the world. You're not able to trust anybody else around you. If you have social anxiety, you're not able to socialize. You won't get out of your house to go for a party unless, and then you feel like people are pushing you to do something. If your friends come and ask you to come out or whatever, everything in you does not want to step out of your comfort zone of isolation, because that is where you feel safe. So obviously, and then you're afraid to talk to anyone. You're afraid to really even try and build a relationship with anyone. And those anxieties also turn into you self-sabotaging when it comes to relationships sometimes, or it can be romantic relationships, it can be familiar relationships, anything. You sabotage, you push people away because your anxieties just don't let you
Depression,
open up.
it can lead to
um, Sorry, was there somebody speaking?
No.
Okay.
Okay, just go on, Shanti.
All
Yes.
right. And I guess also when it comes to things like studies, exam times, anxieties can really weigh in a lot when it comes to exams. Your mind is not able to focus. Even when you're studying, if you're someone who has anxieties, you're worried about a negative outcome long before that outcome has happened, right? So you've kind of made up your mind that everything's going down the drain, so why bother, kind of thing. Or you're so panicked about it, you can't focus. You can't really that sort of resilience or that drive that you need. You don't have the ability to do that. So those are various ways in which if you have to present, for instance, some courses or some forms of studies, you have to make presentations. There are vocal presentations. You can have anxiety that can affect that ability to sort of, you can be a brilliant person, you can have all the facts and all the information in place, you can be like the most knowledgeable person in the room, and you have some sort of anxiety that just stops you from showing the world what you have in you, what you possess. So I think just that light inside you is dimmed by your mind. And depression is also, I guess, depression doesn't let you see positivity. Depression is like a dark, to me, again, depression changes from person to person and how people experience it or how they can express it. To me, depression is a dark well that you can't get out of. You don't know how to get out of it. Sometimes you don't even identify that you're in that well. You're just like morose. You just, nothing's working out. You just don't see the point of waking up the next day. You don't know why. You can't explain it, but you're just so sad, so down. And sometimes you can be even someone who has high functioning depression, where you're going around doing your thing in life, you're socially active, people see the smile, people hear your voice, but inside you're dying, and you're just breaking inside and you can't hold on. So again, when it comes to your social activities, when it comes to your studies, you're not fully present because your mind is battling with itself. that you're not able to actually engage in whatever it is you're supposed to be doing in real time. And those things are distractions, and they can be very harmful as you move forward in life, unless you are able to identify it, unless you are able to seek the help and the support with professionals, with family, with friends who care, who know how to support you. And these are both, unless it's at a very high clinical, severe clinical level, these are things that you can learn to live with, manage, and sometimes cure in certain instances.
Thank you, Shanuki. That was a very, very detailed answer. Thank you so much. So my next question is out to Dr. Chanel. When it comes to mental health problems, that is such a stigmatized topic, especially in Sri Lanka. And I'm glad that finally people are opening up, people are talking about it. But it's a long road, and I hope that, we'll be there soon. In terms of seeking help, what are the most common barriers people face when seeking treatments for mental health problems in Sri Lanka?
I would say that the stigma has a lot to do with it. Because culturally, I see a lot of people coming in, and a lot of them are really shy because they're afraid that their parents will know that they're there. They're worried that their husband will know that they're there. A lot of them who come actually, are really worried that they're there to begin with, because there's this huge ideology behind having problems, right? Especially in our culture, whereas like in the States, if you juxtaposition the two places that I've spent the most amount of time in my life, in the States, it's like all about, okay, everyone's got problems, let's just show our problems. Like problems are so cool to have, and then in Sri Lanka, it's the exact opposite. It's like, no, we don't have problems. We know our crap, we know our shit, we've got our shit together. And the fact is, no, most people do not have their shit together. Okay, and the fact is there's nothing wrong with that. And I just really wish more people would know this. I'm sure the people in this forum obviously are veterans at this. They know this, right? We know that, it's okay to have problems. And we know that problems are a part of life. But I think culturally, it's really looked down upon. And that's why we have this thought process around perfectionism, which is, oh, you got to be perfect. And no one really even knows what that means, but yet, pursuing it. And I think until, and thanks to, the younger generations, I have to commend you all for this, because you all are making it okay, right? Conversations like this amongst us, right? This is how change happens, because you're normalizing it. The problem is it's not normal. And when I was doing my master's and my PhD, the first question that they asked in both forums was, what is normal? That is the first thing that they ask preclinical doctors there. What is normal? How do you define that? Do any of us even here know what that means, right? And that's because human beings, we are so complex, right? And so then we define abnormality as something that causes dysfunction, right? So if you're not functioning properly, like if you can't eat, if you can't go to work, if you can't have and maintain your relationships, then something is wrong, which I think is not a bad definition in a way, because what we want to correct is how we are, living our lives, right? Like thriving, as we talked about earlier. So I think the barrier is mainly perception and cultural bias, especially in Sri Lanka right now. And you can see that it's changing, and that the more it's changing, right? Because more people are talking about it, less of a stigma, right? And I'm very, very optimistic about this. I think now mental health, okay, one thing is we have to be careful not to glamorize mental health too much and over, kind of, make it look as if, oh, it's the cool thing to talk about. Because everyone's depressed, right? Everyone's anxious now. And that takes away from the people who really do have, like, clinical issues. And we should never take them, that away from them, Because when you are in that, as Shanuki said, that deep, dark well, man, does it feel like everything is falling in on you, right? And so we can't make it, so we need to normalize it in the culture, but at the same time, not glamorize it too much, and offer access to the people who really need it. And we've got to start saying, you know what, it is a normal thing to have issues and have these kind of clinical disorders. There's nothing disgusting about it. It's you would never make fun of someone who has cancer. You would never tell someone who has leukemia, oh, get over it. It's not a big deal, come on, figure out your leukemia. Come on now. Would you ever do that? No. But that's what mental health people have to go through here, right? When they are going through a disorder, some kind of dysfunction, even small things, like say they're going through a breakup and they're really feeling it, right? I mean, you don't look down on people who are having pain. Regardless of the origin of the pain, it's still painful, right? It could be an exam that you got an F for, but that F basically decides your future for someone in a rural community in Sri Lanka. That's their life. They believe that an A is going to get them to a job that can help fund their families, right? So we have to basically kill the stigma. We've got to kill the stigma. And I know the people in this forum are more than capable of doing that. So I think we're in good company. And I think it starts in places like this and with the younger generation, right? So keep doing that, because that's the only way we're going to overcome this and make it work.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chanel. That was a very good answer. Moving on, this question is for Dr. Udena. What is the importance of getting help early when there's emotional distress? Are there other factors that you see from prolonged and untreated anxiety and depression?
So emotional distress itself is not a bad thing, because we all go through that. I think it becomes a bad thing when the experience becomes bad. So we all feel distressed at some point in time, but it's variable for all people. What stresses me might not stress you. What stresses you might not stress me. But there's a tendency for things in the world to be kind of standardized in a certain way and not consider this kind of individuality, this individual factor. So what happens is, you are in a state of emotional distress that is not productive for you. Something that you can't cope with. What might happen is you get the experience of not only being not able to deal with with the situation that caused this issue, but also you get an experience of this distress, this emotion, and not being able to cope with it. And funnily, your mind really, if you take the amygdala, your mind remembers this experience more than the actual situation. And in future situations that might not be so distressing or dangerous, your mind might react in a way that is colored by your past experiences. Right? I think Shanuki explained that really well. So the need for getting help or treatment might be this, because if this continues to happen, what might happen is, we kind of understand of a thing called kindling. The more this uncontrolled situation that you can't cope with continues, even small situations that you might have been able to cope with before become very dangerous to you in your mind, and you become unable to cope with it, and then you carry this memory of this experience with you, and then this kind of affects your whole experience of what you do. And for youth, they are in a vulnerable state in their development because of their brain development and also their social development, relationships, education. And when this happens in this kind of state or stage, it might have repercussions for later life, regrets and all that, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So I think that's a major reason why you should kind of address this thing earlier. But on the other hand, if you can keep distress at a level that you can actually cope with, at the upper level of what you can cope with, I mean, that's when you actually develop emotionally, emotion regulation, emotional intelligence. If you keep on learning to cope with emotional distress at the higher level of what you can do, that stands you in good stead in the future when you have to face the difficult situations again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Udena. So moving on to our next question. This is actually part and parcel of what Dr. Chanel talked about, the common barriers when seeking treatment for mental health problems. This is for Gaia. What do you think are the best ways to reach out to the youth in order to erase the stigma of mental health? Gaia? Gaia, you're on mute.
So
Okay.
sorry, I did not catch that.
Okay,
Every time
let
you ask me the question, something happens.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so let me ask the question again. So this is actually following up on the
If you
discussion
could
that
repeat the question.
yes. So this is actually following up on the discussion that Dr. Chanel brought up, basically the stigma that surrounds mental health that prevents young people from talking to professionals and getting the help they need. In your personal opinion, what do you think are the best ways to reach out to the youth and erase the stigma of mental health?
It's really interesting because as much as personally I've been thinking that we've been really normalizing this. We've been, I mean, in the sense we've been talking about it out in the open than what we used to, let's say 2012 when I first came into the country. Um, I'm all about expressing myself. So when I first spoke to my family about what what I felt, I feel like I'm in a really dark place and I feel suicidal on and off. They'd be like, what are you talking about? No such thing. We can't give an. So that compared to what we get to experience now, I mean, I personally felt like that has obviously progressed, but recently, I'm a very observant person. So when I'm around people, I realized recently through a conversation, I realized that one of my friends found it extremely disturbing to accept the fact that, you know, she may have gone through some form of depression or anxiety or some form of trauma. So I realize it's normal that even nowadays with what's available to us, um, it's still very possible that a lot of us may not feel comfortable enough to accept the fact that, hey, I may be going through something, I may be internalizing, I may not feel comfortable enough to speak about it. So the fact that we are having this conversation right now, um, you know can make a massive difference in someone who may be struggling to accept the fact that, okay, I may be going through something of this nature. So having this conversation is one of the most important things that we can do. There was one more thing that I really wanted to speak about, something that I think it slipped my mind. Could you tell me the question again, just so I can
Yes.
just...
In your personal opinion, what are the best ways to reach out to the youth in order to erase the stigma of mental health?
Yeah, and I feel like one of the reasons we may be going through depression or anxiety is also not having or lack of expression, not being able to channel what we are going through into something that may help you release it. May it be physical activity, may it be writing. And recently I also realized I have this new rule that I've imposed on myself. After 5 o'clock, I do not look at the screen. So that made me realize, oh, this gives me opportunity to really like, I realize how much I was not living. You know what I mean? Like I started journaling more, I started writing, I started reading more, and it gave me insight into so many things, especially the workings of my own mind. The fact that I had all this time to really understand, why am I feeling this way? Why am I going through these emotions? Writing about it, exploring it, it really helped me in this evolution. I felt like I really up-leveled myself from where I was to where I am now within like a matter of weeks. And that's just because I took a little bit of time away from social media and the screen. And I feel like if again, I don't think social media is the enemy. I feel like we just don't know how to use it as a tool. I feel like, you know, it has been great for a businesswoman like me to really develop this brand and a business that it helps really service a lot of people. And I just feel like it's become toxic because as humans, we don't know the middle path, like the Buddha said. We just go on to extremes. So I feel like also opening the mind of the youth to understand the fact that, hey, take some time to, I mean, I'm not talking about isolation, but a lot of us are scared to be alone because they have not spent time alone. It's super scary for people to spend time alone because it's almost as if they don't know who they are. They haven't spent enough time with themselves, that when they do, all of these unprocessed emotions, they pop up, and then I'm like, okay, I don't want to face this. I rather, like, you know, flip through Instagram or watch YouTube videos and not face what is there. So I feel like just opening that avenue for them to make them understand, spend time away from the screen, go out into your garden maybe, and, like, you know, walk barefoot and just connect and be present with your body and your mind, connect with your loved ones and your family, and take time out to understand and really reflect. I feel like a lot of us just don't reflect and contemplate and, like, go within and, like, understand why things are happening a certain way. So opening these avenues up alone, I feel like, will take away a lot of this repressed, this depressed, unexpressed, unprocessed emotions that we've been internalizing. That itself will leave a lot of people not so feeling less shitty about themselves. So I went on a rant, but I feel like to take away the stigma is to also talk about the solutions and letting them know, of course, we're all going through this, but there are very simple things to do. For an example, like, for me, I realized during the first wave of corona, my sleep cycle was so messed up. I went to bed at 3-4 in the morning, and then I realized what a toll it was taking on my mental health. I was not functioning well, I was super lethargic, I was tired all the time. And then I was like, hey, I'm not going to go through this anymore, I just want to switch it. So I forced myself to go to bed at 8:30, read, journal by 9:30. I'm gone, in the sense I'm asleep. 4:30 I wake up, and I started feeling superhuman again. So small tweaks can really help. It's not even that you're depressed, it's just that your endocrine system and your hormones are all messed up. So it's making you feel so down that you feel like, oh my god, I have a problem. I thought I had insomnia. No, I was just looking at the screen for too long that it messed up everything for me, and I couldn't fall asleep. So after a week of forcing myself to just switch off your phone, switch off the screen, and you know what? If you have to stay up all night, do it. Just don't look at the screen. And then after a few days of forcing, my body clock fell into place, and my mental health improved in like 100 times. And it's not even about, we have this culture of productivity, hustle. No, when you actually take time off, you start working effectively. And by 5 o'clock, if you can, for me at least, when I spend that time on myself, I realized my work was way more efficient. My focus level was way more. I didn't feel like checking my phone every 10 minutes while doing something else. That way I'm not even actually focusing deeply, and I'm not even in that flow state. I'm just doing surface level work just to make myself feel like I'm productive. So I don't even know if I answered the question, but I went on that.
Thank you, Gaia. So our next question is for Dr. Chanel. This is actually one of the points that you touched upon in one of the previous questions. What are the best ways to treat anxiety and depression other than through medication?
All righty. Well, I could be biased, but I think one thing that really works is cognitive behavior therapy, which is what I'm trained in, right? So that's the module. Because empirical evidence suggests that they have very high positive outcomes, especially when it comes to clinical depression and anxiety, right? So what is cognitive behavioral therapy? Basically talk therapy, where you restructure your thought processes that affect your behavior, right? So as Gaia mentioned, journaling. Now journaling, okay, is a monumental therapeutic practice because it's self-reflection. It puts your thoughts, what's in your head, which is a lot, right? I mean, we have like an estimated 65,000 thoughts a day or something ridiculous like that, right? So it's like a ridiculous amount of thoughts that are going on. And this is partly why meditation, which is something that I've seen. So what I really like about the work that I do is that it's integrative. So it's cognitive behavioral therapy and it's all that clinical stuff with wellness practices, right? So I have seen amazing change in people that have chosen to go back to basics, right? So you know what? We were talking about dopamine earlier, right? What is the most natural way of getting dopamine? Exercise. Okay, and eating healthy also, believe it or not, right? So when they have done research that suggests that if you eat certain wholesome foods, automatically serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine increases, right? Why? Because you're feeding your body, your mind, and everything that you are in a positive sense. So I think I look at CBT as a way of feeding the mind. So you're basically feeding the mind all the things that you need, that is helpful. And what we do is we question our thought processes. Most of us don't sit with our thoughts, as Gaia said, right? A lot of people, if you give them time to be isolated, they will hate themselves. Because when you listen to what your head is telling you, right? It's not pretty most of the time, right? So basically CBT and mental health intervention is all about looking at what's going on in here, right? And a lot of it is unconscious, some of it is subconscious, right? So it's just about figuring out what to filter through, right? Looking at the things that you can control, making sure that your cognitive biases, and we have so many cognitive biases, are kept in check, right? So the non-medical way, one is the talk therapy. So it can be CBT, it can be emotionally focused therapy, it could be systematic family therapy. There's so many models, right? Talk therapy mixed with, I would say, wellness, lifestyle choices, right? So eating healthier, working out, movement is so powerful, right? Dancing, you might agree, right? Dancing is so amazing. It's exercise, but it's, it's movement, right? It's just movement and there's music and it's joy and it's with your friends sometimes or it's with a partner. I don't know whether it's all right to say this, but as a certified sex therapist also, I will say sex is another way, just saying, okay? It increases dopamine, okay? And it's good for you. It's a natural human function that is really, really good for you. So there are very natural ways of creating dopamine, right? And if you couple talk therapy, right, and modalities which include journaling, self-reflection, modeling behavior, gratitude practice, all these wonderful things, with lifestyle and wellness health-related choices, I would say it shows. I mean, the evidence is there. You can read it, look it up, right? CBT has very high positive outcomes, and very often people who are feeling really bad in their lives, a lot of it has to do with their lifestyle and their environment. So part of it is nature. Definitely, there's some biochemical imbalance sometimes with clinical issues, but there's also a huge nurture aspect, environmental factors that we need to consider, right? So I will basically end the answer to this question with a really good analogy that I heard a doctor once tell me in the States. So we are like a loaded gun, right? The bullets are our genetics, right? Whatever predisposition we have for alcohol, depression, addiction, temperament, whatever, right? Anxiety, everything. The environment is the trigger, right? So you have to be very careful how you deal with your environment, and the environment can be dealt with with certain lifestyle choices. And talk therapy is a lifestyle choice too. If you choose to go to therapy when you're feeling really, really bad, and some people don't even go for therapy when they feel bad, they just go to therapy because it's something that they do, like going to the gym, right? There's nothing wrong with that. See, mental health intervention doesn't have to be at the worst case scenario either. It could be something that you do for yourself, to reflect, to have someone to talk to that is unbiased, right? At the same time, the bare basics, hydration, sleeping. I talk about sleeping. Sleeping is so important for your mental health, because if you don't sleep, you cut the production of melatonin, which you need really, really bad, and neurogenesis, which is when our cells start revitalizing us. That only happens when we sleep. So our cells can't regenerate unless we sleep. What does that say about people who are insomniacs and who are working overtime, who are not balancing their lives? So if we can combine those two, right, anything is possible for positive mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Chanel. So at the outset of the panel discussion, I did mention that one of the main objectives that is hoped to achieve during this panel discussion is to help the youth understand how to identify individuals suffering from these mental health issues. So we have come to our final question for today's session, and this is directed at all of the panelists. What what can we rather do as the youth to support our loved ones or peers who are suffering from anxiety and depression? Would Shanuki start the answering? Yeah.
Don't trivialize it. Don't dismiss it. Perhaps you might not be able to understand it because you don't have a personal context or a frame of reference for what somebody is going through. But that doesn't mean that somebody is not going through something. So be there. I think the biggest thing that a lot of people struggling with mental health anxieties or stress or depression, like I said, it's that sense of isolation, that sense of feeling like you're completely alone in what you're struggling through. Just the knowledge that someone is there without judgment, without critique, without any other agenda, that someone is simply there is a big help. Trust me on this one. So if you feel like there's a friend or a family member who's struggling, be there. It's not our role to fix them. We should not try, because from our point of view, what might work for us doesn't necessarily have to work for another person. And unless you are a licensed, qualified mental health practitioner, it can be very, very dangerous for you to try and fix somebody's problem. People who are going through mental health issues don't need you to give them the solution. They just need you to be there. And don't judge, don't say, what is that, what's the big deal in that, like Dr. Shanana said. Otherwise, don't say, we tend to make, with the best of intentions, we tend to sort of trivialize the issue by saying, no, my auntie's nephew's third wife's cousin wife's removed also has the same problem, and otherwise you talk about yourself. And so it's about them. Focus on them. Just say you're there. If possible, when somebody is struggling through something, they don't have the frame of mind to find the necessary information or the resources that they need for help, right? They wouldn't know the hotlines to call. They wouldn't even be thinking about those things. Who can they go and speak to? Who might be able to support them professionally? And as someone who is their friend or family, you can actually have those resources on you. So if you do your own bit of reading, and the world is open, the internet is there for you to learn as much as possible about these things from verified sources, and do a little bit of search and learning, that you also have some sort of knowledge, as well as you have access to the resources that might be helpful to that person. So you can simply say, I know you're in pain, I'm here for you. But it would be great if we can go and talk about this to someone who might be able to help you more than I can. Here are the resources, here are the numbers, here's a place that we can go to. You can accompany them if they don't want to go alone, but just give them the resources. Let the decision be theirs. That's the other thing that we do as Sri Lankans, is we push people to do what we think is right for them, which is again something that causes more anxiety, and you're causing more stress. So don't push anybody, even though you feel like that is the only solution there is. Give them the option, let the decision be theirs, and simply be there. Simply hear them out. And that anyone can do.
Thank you, Shanuki. Gaia, could you add on to this?
So I think just like Shanuki said, it's about holding space. And you know what? Through personal experience, when a person is in that place, advice might not necessarily work. They might not be able to even process that information and make a sound decision in that moment. So what's most important is to hold space and be there for them, and to make them understand that what they're feeling is valid. You wouldn't feel this way unless there was a reason behind it. And from my personal experience, I think a lot of people struggle when they go through these lows, because they constantly want to run away from it because it is unpleasant, and what they're feeling in that moment is a result of not addressing certain deep rooted issues. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so in my personal experience, like I'm not a professional when it comes to psychology, is helping them understand that it's okay to feel this way, accept the fact that it's there and sit with it. It's okay to sit with it, and then ask for help, ask for professional help, and really holding that space and accommodating them to go through the motions, and also to seek out for professional help.
Yeah, thank you, Gaia. As a experienced person in this field, Dr. Artigala, could you add on something to this statement?
I don't think I have much to add. I think I'll be just rephrasing what was already said.
Okay.
I think what's important is really to meet them where they are, right? I mean, and not where we expect them to be. So all these models and all that, but just meet them where they are. That's one thing. The second thing is, if you do make the commitment to meet them where they are, part of it might be, part of the needs might be, as you said, as I think was already discussed, might be not to discuss this, or for you to take on a bit of the distress yourself. So be ready to have some kind of emotional turmoil yourself if you're prepared to help them as well. And if they do need help, professional help, referring them is always a good thing to do. And again, to kind of rephrase what was said earlier, there are problems that have no solution. I mean, we've all come across all these problems. And I think the solution in those kind of problems is bearing with the problem. If you can do that, help them do that, that will also be useful as a peer.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Udena. And lastly, Dr. Chanel, would you like to?
Well, I will just basically add on to what the three other panelists said, because I think it ties in very nicely. And I think the word to sum it up would be listen, because that's my favorite word. Because I think when you listen, when you learn to listen to what's going on, right? Whether it's a loved one, whether it's yourself, right? We are very good sometimes at giving our opinions and suggestions, but we are pretty shitty listeners for the most part. And I think if we can just cultivate that, right? Not just professionals. I think definitely friends, people of the community, everyone, your loved ones, your teachers, your politicians, dare I say. Good luck with that one. But, if collectively we all just listen to each other, even people we don't like very Even people we consider, negative people or terrible people, or, I'm so much better than that person. I think you just need to listen, because you'll be surprised what you will hear, right? Because chances are we have a lot more in common than we think, because we all want to be heard. We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted and told that we are not freaks, that we're actually, human beings, right? That are worthy of feeling emotion and, having scars, right? So I think learning to listen, and I think the youth is doing it already. I think the millennials and beyond are really listening, because I think it's the most social justice oriented time, right? I mean, there have been periods in the past that have been very social justice oriented, but now thanks to technology, it has become even more out there. And I think if we use these tools, as we all discussed today about the power of social media and how, we like it, we use it, and there's a good side to it, but there's also this really, really dark side, just like everything else. If we just learn to listen to what's being said and use it in a positive way, I think we can go very, very far. So whether it's someone suffering from depression, suicidality, before you judge someone, and what we call the fundamental attribution error in social psychology, which is basically believing that everyone else, when they do something wrong, there's something intrinsically wrong with them, right? Not that there's something external that has happened to them. I think if we learn to just say, okay, you know what, if you're going through something, if you're acting in a negative or unhealthy or maybe what we would say concerning way, what's going on? Let me know. Let me just listen. I'm not going to tell you what to do or who to go to yet. I'm just going to sit here, right? And be there, right? And that's all there is to it.
Okay, then. And then with that, we have come to the conclusion of today's session. First and foremost, let me take the time to thank all of our panelists, Dr. Chanel D. Almeida, Dr. Uday Natigala, Shanuki D. Alvis, and Gaia Kodituaku for taking your time to be with us here today and to share your valuable insight and personal experience on this topic. Honestly, we can't thank you enough for being here today. And
an honor for me to be on this awesome panel. So thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you very much.
It's all our pleasure. Thank you so much. So I would also like to thank our partners, Sumithrayo Sri Lanka, our official event partner, our digital media partners, Lanka Deepa Online and Daily Mirror Online, our live stream partner, Flexus Labs, for making this all possible. And on a very personal note, I would like to congratulate the committee behind Better Why for organizing such an amazing panel discussion that addresses one of the most important and often very overlooked topics in today's society. And not forgetting our amazing audience that joined in today. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this session. And before ending today's session, I would like to talk a little bit about the work done by Sumithrayo. They are a registered member of Befriends Worldwide and functions as a non-political, non-religious organization focused on providing emotional support to those in risk of suicide. They work towards creating an environment where people are able to explore their feelings without fear or prejudice to promote better mental health and well-being among individuals. Now, if you ever feel emotionally overwhelmed, please reach out to them. You can contact them on 011 268 2535. Let me repeat that number for you. That's 011 268 2535, or visit any of their centers or even drop an email. Always remember, it is never too late to seek help. A video will be played right after this session for you to get a better idea of the work done by Sumithrayo. Now, Russell Williams once said, if we start being honest about our pain, our anger, and our shortcomings, instead of pretending they don't exist, then maybe we'll leave a world a better place than we found it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's panel discussion. Thank you for joining in. Good night.
It's been 2 years since my father passed away, and not a single day when I don't think about it. Initially, I thought it was a dream, like I couldn't comprehend it. I was like, I'm dreaming. I don't know how to put it into words. It's like one of the worst things that could ever happen to you. And I pray that nobody has to go through that pain. Nobody, not even an enemy, because it's not a natural death. It was a very sudden, very shocking death.
මහත්මයා නැති වුණයි කියලා මට ඒ කෝල් එක ආපු වෙලාවේ මට අපිට ඒක හිතා ගන්න බැරි දෙයක් වුණා. ඒක පුදුමාකාර මේ මං හිතන්නේ ජීවිතේ කිසිම දවසක කිසිම කෙනෙක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ නැති දෙයක්. ඇත්තටම මෙතන මෙහිම දැන් මරණ එක්කෙනා මරුණන් පස්සේ ඉන්න මිනිසුන් ඒක දරා ගන්න බැරි වේදනාවක්. ඒක ගැන මටවත් මගේ මහත්යත් ඒ ගැන හිතන්න නැතුව ඇති. එයා එහෙම දැනන් හිටියනම් මං හිතන්නේ මේ කවදාවත් මේක කරයි කියලා.
A suicide destroys more than one life. Every suicide rips a family apart and engulfs a community in loss and sadness. According to John Davey, a British Army officer stationed in Sri Lanka in the early 19th century, neither suicide nor homicide were common among Sri Lankans. Sadly, Sri Lanka, a country with such a compassionate history, today reports one of the highest suicide rates in the world. During the year 2013, 3,455 Sri Lankans took their own lives. That's almost 10 suicides a day. Suicidal tendencies and self-harm are much more prevalent among men than women. The country loses 4 men to suicide for every 1 woman who takes her own life. 2 out of every 10 suicide victims are a teenager or a young adult.
Unfortunately, people tend to attribute the act to a social reason, but actually the underlying reason is mainly either it's a mental health disorder like depression, or it's the intense emotional reaction following a stressful situation, a crisis or a trauma in life. Right? So when we talk about mental disorders with regard to suicide, it's mainly depression. It can lead to suicide, but there are other mental health problems. In depression, actually, initially they develop symptoms like feeling helpless, feeling worthless. They get suicidal ideas only when depression becomes severe. So our aim is actually to identify these people who are suffering from depression early.
Family-related issues such as disputes, frustration with elders, domestic violence, and breakdown of kin relationships account for 1/4 of all suicides. Mental and physical disorders account for another 1/4 of suicides. Poverty, indebtedness, and employment-related issues are reasons for another 1/10 of suicides. Disappointment and frustration caused by the breakdown of romantic relationships drives another 10% to suicide. A small minority are driven by substance addiction.
Informal and confidential emotional support is very important to a person who is going through a crisis, because it will help them to unburden without being judged, and it will help them to relieve themselves, and because they will feel accepted and they will feel comfortable and they will relieve themselves.
Not all people who commit suicide wish for death. They simply want to escape from a situation they can no longer live with. A suicide survivor once said, "I never wanted to kill myself. I felt I had to." A person with suicidal thoughts may not ask for help or may not know that he or she could be helped. Every one of us can help a fellow human being susceptible to suicide and self-harm.
If you think you have feelings of suicide, or if you are going through a serious crisis, and if you know of someone who is going through a crisis and thinking of taking their own lives, please talk to us. We are always there. You are not alone. Please come and talk to Sri Lanka Sumithrayo.
Suicide is a preventable human tragedy. Saving a life from suicide saves many other lives from lifelong devastation. Kind hearts, compassionate minds, and watchful eyes save lives from the tragedy of suicide. Sri Lanka Sumithrayo. Say yes to life.